Morning, everybody. Hi, how you doing?
Hello.
You alright? We're today at a beautiful ruin, that of Greyfriars Friary in Dunwich on the Suffolk coast. Enjoy your history lesson, and we're going to have a mini wander around it. There's not much left, but what is left is actually a wonderful testament to actually the story of this wonderful place, and I'm sure we'll sort of fill you in as afterwards on top of that. So stay tuned, let's go do it. Ready?
Yep.
Come on. Situated along the Suffolk coast lies a truly small but impressive ruin, that the remains of Greyfriars Medieval Friary. The friary was part of a large monastery and came about when the Franciscan order of monks who first came to Dunwich in the 1250s, founded by Richard Fitzjohn and Alice his wife. The monks had set up a monastic house near the harbour, but a massive storm on New Year's Eve in 1286 destroyed their building. So land was given to them further inland as a gift of the burgesses in 1289 to start to build a more permanent monastery. The site for its day would have looked relatively humble in comparison to most, but still an impressive sight nonetheless. And even though at its height the site would have contained no less than around 20 monks, life on the monastery would have been relatively peaceful and would have been a focal point for the centre of the community of Dunwich. Coastal erosion would play a major part in the shrinking size of Dunwich, mainly caused by storms. The impact, especially in the 14th century when Dunwich port was destroyed, would change the area forever. Fast forward in time, and the demise of the monastery was like most across the country, due to Henry VIII and the dissolution of the monasteries. Greyfriars would be no exception, having been almost totally dismantled. Its final note came when the ruins would see use as a jail, a town hall, and even at one point a house. But time has caught up with this site, and with that all that stands are the walls and the refectory. Now given Grade 2 listed status, it is well worth a visit should you be in the area. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed that history lesson. Like I said, there is really not much to this room, but it's well worth it. I personally think it's well worth a nice... More importantly, for the beautiful coastline, which after this we're going to properly check out, but free parking with a charitable donation.
Yep. And
Greyfriars Ruin is also free as well. Again, if you would like to make a donation, of course you can. That's really easy. Just check out Greyfriars Friary on Google's and it will come up and you can make a donation if you feel like you want to preserve what is left. So let me just point out really what we're sort of looking at. So in essence, we're looking at a very small part of what this monastery friary was sort of really about, and the idea was that obviously the whole area of this would have dominated. And what's really interesting about this is that you get the scale because of the wall that we're surrounded in. So this is the original, or part of the medieval wall that was here. So it basically enclosed it, and it's bizarre to sort of think that the coastline is just literally there, and to think that again this place was again a real... It would have been quite a focal hub for most people, and actually when you come through the gates you can understand the statement that it was making. And actually the biggest thing that I just wanted to sort of point out, which is actually a bit of a surprise in strange ways, that we're actually quite high up. Let me try and get out of the light. We're high up and it actually overlooks the beach and coast, but I would like to sort of caveat that by saying that this is an ever-changing part of a coastline on the Suffolk coast. In other words, it's sort of like the sea will come and go and it's deteriorating at a rapid rate. So erosion is erosion. Unfortunately, not much we can do about it. But again, this just tells a wonderful story of really this part of medieval history which we come a lot across in East Anglia, where there's a lot of abbeys, there's a lot of monasteries, there's a lot of ruined churches. And because we're in Suffolk, it's a little bit of a break for us to sort of do this. But fundamentally, what we're looking at is just a wonderful snapshot section of this. We know there wasn't many monks that were here. The modern conceptions, we always assume that because of the size of these types of places, we'd assume that there's a lot. In fact, actually, there probably wasn't. It was really for a small community, but then obviously it would facilitate a more of a wider sort of village part. But just wonderful, really. Sophie, thoughts and feelings, please, if you please. Sorry about everyone, it was light.
Yeah, it's small and sweet, isn't it?
It is. It's just like I said, it's a small section of it. But as I said, when you look at the wall and the perimeter, it does give a larger view. Now, what we're going to do in a minute as well, we need to talk about the last grave.
Yes.
We're going to do a video on that with this as well, so we're tying that in because that's really important. I didn't cover that in the history lesson because, for obvious reason, it's a separate thing, but it's part of what we're trying to do. The last grave is a clue in that, and it's actually quite a sad story in essence, but it proves of how much this coastal erosion is. And actually, when you park up in the car park, they do sort of mention that quite a bit. There's an old photo on there as well. The stages, how much it sort of eroded over time and how far it's had to sort of move in. And we know that also on a couple of these, like Leiston Abbey, for example, the fact they had to move that abbey because of coastal erosion to a place further inland. And that's literally a stone's throw away from here. So you can understand the importance of all these places that were put near the coast for reasons that we sort of assume that, really, especially in Dunwich's case, I mean, obviously, as you sort of found out in your history lesson, the port of Dunwich, once that had been taken out by a storm, really the village and the community wasn't really the same ever again. And obviously it's the same here with this, with here where we're at Greyfriars. The fact that obviously they had to move, it was really unsustainable. And then obviously, as we sort of said before, with the dissolution of the monasteries, everything just got completely ruined. It's sad to sort of see what it's in, but we've talked enough. We'll just take you for another wander around. Okay, come on. So everybody, I'm not sure if you can see this, but see the coast, it just swings around a little bit. Sorry, you might not be able to see that, but can you see it through this one? Let's have a look. So, we'll look through this one. Yeah, you can see it. You can see just Finger of Doom just over there roughly. You can see you can see the sea. Beautiful horses. Very busy here today as well. Lots of people, which is fantastic to note. Let's see with that free parking. Wow. So obviously what we're looking at here is basically two levels, two separate levels, and you can tell that obviously if you didn't have to understand that by the windows. And this really would have been not necessarily the main part, but all of these sections would have been really vital in the maintenance of basically the order, really, and the vitalness and the statement of which they put into this. And like I said, the thing that's really interesting about this one compared to a lot of the others is that because we've still got the containing wall that basically encircles the whole of the abbey, and like I said, to understand that where we're situated here is like literally just a small section, but if you can see the idea of the scale of what we're looking at, to note that this small section will just denominate like the fact of how large this actually was, you can really imagine of the scale in which it just would stretch out and push out, which is remarkable. So Soph's taking photos. We've walked up through the main gate because obviously that's really what you should do when you want to visit this. If you love your history, you should do that. And then what we're going to do afterwards is we're going to literally take 180 degrees and then back on ourselves, and then our last grave is right on the end, right by the stretch of coast. It does obviously say don't climb these rings. There's not really much you can climb up on this, but for all intents and purposes, what really remains could have easily been lost. And I think really that's the subject of this video, really the importance of the message of this, because of its size, because there's not much remains. What does remain, as I've always said, this tells an absolutely fascinating story about what life would have been like scale-wise, and the convenience of being right by the sea, and obviously backing on into the village on an ever-eroding coast. Really remarkable. Well, everybody, we are now going to head off to the last grave, which tells its own fascinating story, but we needed to put it part of this to show and highlight how much this coast has been ever eroded. So let's do it. Come on. So everybody, me and Sophie just been talking about this because obviously we have got information boards here, but they are at the end of what I would refer to at the end of Greyfriars. Really, when I always think that they should be at the entrance coming down into the gate. Just call me just old-fashioned on that one. But you can see where we're at, looking down, and obviously this is our refectory and kitchen, and you can see what I mentioned about how important what we're looking at was in terms of really the idea that in essence food, the communal part of it, and then we've got our main cloister which is situated. So in a strange way it is a bit of an angle where we're looking, but actually the part that does survive, excluding the church, really is an interesting part. And you can just see that even as a kitchen how like detailed and beautiful that probably would have looked during its time, with most of the layout sort of like looking roughly the same. And then we said we've got our ditches here and our boundaries, but like I said, this beautiful wall that sort of contains it, which is absolutely wonderful, really amazing. So everybody, there's a final piece which is probably actually the most saddest sort of thing to end on really for this video, which isn't related to Greyfriars but still tells a really poignant story. And to be honest with you, we did mention, me and Sophie, when we visited, we've got to do this, but we needed to do it as part of this story because it actually just tells how bad the erosion has got. So this is the last grave what we're looking at, and this is the last surviving gravestone from the churchyard of the medieval Church of All Saints, which lay about 40 metres to the east of this spot, so really not that far away in consideration. And they do say that old bones still occasionally weather out of the cliff face, which is right below us. It's really difficult. That, everybody, is literally there.
5 metres?
Not even that, is it?
Possibly.
Yeah, do you reckon?
Yeah,
And the church was disused from 1758 and fell over the eroding cliff between 1904 and 1920. And the last tower buttress was dismantled and rebuilt in the present churchyard. So basically they were like, well, instead of just doing that, we'll just get rid of it. And then the gravestone reads, in memory of Jacob Forster, who departed this life March 12, 1796, aged 38. It does say that don't climb the fence.
No.
We've got to keep this one. So yeah, but the irony is actually that from where we are in this little bit, you know, you could almost touch it if you got, you know, you're in there. But amazing, and I like the fact that they've kept the actual wording from that, because you wouldn't be able to read that at all from here.
Very well,
So, as is custom, what do you think?
really sad, isn't it? But it's just gone. Bloop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like we said, this part of Suffolk coast is quite sort of famous, especially really round. I mean, even going up to East Anglia, it's very sort of stereotypical of the erosion that's been happening, and the fact that obviously even we know that most houses even these days have to be moved in, and you see them fall over and stuff like this. But actually on a historical level, this is so interesting. But yeah, the last grave.
Yeah.
Wow. Anyway, we'll say goodbye in a minute, and we'll just have a poignant moment to ourselves, I reckon.
Yeah.
Come on. Well, everybody, any more words to Phoenix history? Thank you so much for coming along with us. Sophie, any final...
It's cute.
Yeah? Thanks for coming along with us. Feel free to spread the word. The channel really goes a long way in supporting us and liking and subscribing, etc. Take care, everybody. Much love to all of you out there, because history matters. Kapow.